The morning sun shines on the gleaming hide of a muscular ranch horse. The aroma of bacon and coffee drifts from the wood cook stove at a cow camp. Silver spurs jingle as the men and women of the West get set for another day in the saddle. From the heart of Canada's finest ranching country, this is the Spirit of the West with rancher and horse trainer Hugh McLennan and his collection of music, poetry, and conversations with the folks who live and work with horses and cattle in the Spirit of the West.
Well, I think we've got a really interesting one lined up for you today, and I hope you can pour yourself a coffee, sit back and enjoy it, or if you're driving, just turn it up a bit because there's a lot worth hearing, including fallout from the new trade agreement between Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. We'll have comments about its effect on Canada from U.S. Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue.
We get the wheat grading issue resolved. We get the wine issue resolved in British Columbia.
Pleased to hear that the former Georgia governor knows about British Columbia. And another colorful, true story from Baxter Black.
Well, the audience of cowboys hooted, honked, and hollered over the feat of Jim's heading a goose.
And will you hear what he wants to do next? And I have a fascinating guest this week.
And I don't think my parents ever figured that someday an East Indian kid grew up in Kuwait would actually go out to full-time cowboying.
That's working cowboy Sam Simon, who was born in India, worked in Kuwait, and came to North America with a master's degree in engineering, but followed his cowboy dreams, and you'll hear the first chapter of his captivating story today. On the Urban Saddles and Western Wear Horse Training File, the hazard of riding one horse and trying to lead a couple more. Some things you can do to help avoid a wreck. Cowboy poetry and our classic song of the West. And I'll visit with Sam Simon after a pretty appropriate opener from the Sons of the San Joaquin.
From whence came the cowboy, the history is plain. He rode out of Europe on a frigate from Spain. Spain, Mexico, southward and northward he spread. From the gaucho and the huaso to the carol was bred. Your everyday cowboy, and oh, what a sight. More dashing and daring than the medieval night. Medieval night.
Rodriguez, Gonzalez, Villalobos, Padrón, Figueroa, Santiago, Palomino, Rascón, Rojas, Sanguillas.
Cowboy. Yippee-yi, yippee-yo, come a horseman from history. Yippee-yi, yippee-yay, in all colors he came. Yippee-yi, yippee-yo, and his name still holds mystery. He is a legend and cowboy's his name. Name, cowboy's his name. Then into the West from the Civil War days, the white and the black cowboy rode in like a blaze. Some will implore that all cowboys were white. I can tell you from facts, boys, that that isn't right. For all of the cowboys that rode a horseback, one for those hombres was sure enough black. Sure enough black.
Bo Ziger, Rick Johnson, Jim Kelly, Jeff Stall, Nat Love, Isambard, Charlie Glass, Jim Perry, Bobby Crosland, Bill Pickett.
Cowboy. Yippee-yi, yippee-yo, come a horseman from history. Yippee-yi, yippee-yay, in all colors he came. Yippee-yi, yippee-yo, and his name still holds mystery. He is a legend and cowboy's his name. Name, cowboy's his name. If you think the cowboy is all said and done, this hombre that's carved out his place in the sun, he isn't gone, and I'm a-telling you, friend, there's more cows and horses than there's ever been. But a cowboy's a cowboy by whatever name. Whatever his color, his glory's the same, and his name, like his spurs, has a wonderful sound. Keep your eye on the sunset, 'cause he's still around, round, round. He's still around.
Mary Shreve, Gary Morton, Buddy Mitchell, Jack Hanks, John Underwood, Randy Lehman, Bill Evans, Jess Smith, Joel Nelson, Cliff Tankett,
Cowboy, yippee-yi, yippee-yo, come a horseman from history. Yippee-yi, yippee-yay, in all colors he came. Yippee-yi, yippee-yo, and his name still holds mystery. He is a legend and cowboy's his name. Name, name, cowboy's his name. Yippee-yi-yay, yippee-yay, yippee-yay, yippee-yi-yo, yippee-yo, yippee-yo,
Great song there from Lonnie, Jack, and Joe, the Sons of the San Joaquin. After helping judge the Cowboy Trail Cowboy Church Ugly Ranch Horse competition a few weeks ago, I had a chance to visit with Sam Simon, who did a great job in the competition, and I couldn't help but notice him when everybody else was warming up, with his classy buckaroo look and riding a good-looking horse that really worked well.
That was your own horse? That was my own.
What's the story on him?
He was the colt, the first colt I started, and I got him from Bryn Thiessen a couple years ago. He's a 6-year-old now. I got him as a 3-year-old and took him to a Martin Black clinic and got him started there. And then I was working an engineering job then, and then kind of always wanted a cowboy as a kid. And being not from Canada, from India, but I was born and raised in Kuwait. And there's a fate story there too, and you know, I never knew how that would become a reality, of how a kid growing up far away, seeing this on TV. I was like, yeah. I remember asking my mom when I watched the John Wayne's The Cowboys, I said, is that real? And she said, no, it's just TV. I was like, oh, okay. And watching documentaries and things like that, and then kind of learned, oh, this is real. And so came to Canada as a master's student for, did my master's in engineering management and worked in Calgary for a while, and eventually wanted to start my own colt. So kind of spend time with Bryn Thiessen, Gordy Cunningham, and Aaron, and guys I could get around as much, and then kind of had a broker horse to kind of start with, and then I wanted to kind of push the envelope a little and got a colt and started him, and he's by a quarter horse stud and out of a Belgian quarter horse cross mare, so there's a little bit of draft in him.
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah, you could almost see, you know, in the scale and the size of the bone.
Yeah.
Under it.
Yeah. No, he's a pretty good, and then he's a really quiet-minded colt. Yeah. And I told Bryn, because I'm no bronc rider, and I said, look, I can't do that, so can you help me pick a good one? He said, no, we'll give you one you can win on. And so we went to his horse pasture, and he said, take your pick. And his horse kind of walked up out of all the colts. He just kind of was the friendliest one and come up. And I said, I'll take this one. Bryn almost disappointedly said, oh, I figured you would. Yeah.
Yeah. But so, it's been a pretty good
he's been a really good horse. Yeah,
for you.
He's been a really good horse, and just honest, and I've roped at brandings on him and went to the Dog Pound Ranch Rodeo and competed on him, and
really?
Our team won, and he's just been a nice, quiet. I've put him in a few dicey situations, and he's always kept his head cool and just.
Well, Sam takes us through some of those dicey situations and expands on his amazing odyssey to become a well-respected working cowboy when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. Born in India, grew up in Kuwait, Sam Simon has a master's degree in engineering, but from the first time he watched a Western movie, he wanted to be a cowboy. And now he's living that dream, earning his spurs in the North American West. And we were talking about the first colt he started a few years ago and how he guided this good gelding through all the challenges good ranch horses must be able to handle.
Have you got the details on a couple of dicey situations that you got through?
I don't know, you're always worried about taking a horse in a tight corral and calves and things like, or a branding pen. Lots of guys are roping and long ropes are going, and you know, stuff zings around.
Well,
and
the pressure's on.
Yeah,
like it's a
and
high
he can.
situation. You got calves balling
and the propane going, and his first branding I took him to, and he'd come out the gate, and then the propane was hissing, and so he kind of he didn't blow up. He just kind of looked sideways, and I just looked straight ahead and kind of I just said, just keep going. This is not going to hurt you. And kind of looked at it and squirted a little, and then he just lined out, and we just drug quiet, because you got lots of guys on the ground holding calves down, so you can't have. But he didn't. He just kind of takes it all in and just observes, and then, oh yeah, I can live through this, and he'll just go to work. So
you've done some pasture doctoring with him too.
Yeah, I've roped. The first time I roped on him was at a community pasture. I was riding with Dale Thompson, and you've featured some of his poems. From Grovedale, but Dale Cowboys at Roanoke on Two Hills.
Right.
And so he only had 40 rides then, and I went to the pasture to mile him out. And after the full day, Dale's like, we got to go doctor a bull. It was a yearling bull. And I took him, and I said, you sure you want me to rope off of him? He said, Sam, he looks like a pretty quiet horse. You can go ahead. And so I picked up a single hind foot on him and dallied up, turned him away, and just rode him off, slipped rope, would lock it up every now and then so that bull would kind of, and he just leaned into it. And he just didn't, rope touched him on the hind, like I drug logs off of him and things like that. He didn't bother him, so I figured, well, just kind of keep it the same and not let him kind of let him win. So when I'd let rope slip, and he'd just keep walking into it.
Because he doesn't know that he can't pull.
He can't pull.
As long as he can keep moving.
That's something I picked out of Martin's, talking to Martin and Martin Black, like at the main event. I'd come watch him there, and so I kind of slipped rope, and finally that bull went down, and laid over, and we got him doctored, and then we loaded him up in the trailer, and that was the first time I roped off him, and I was like.
Now, did you have to load them in the trailer in the open, or did you have?
No, they were kind of in a water pen, so we kind of had to butt up against the gate, and Dale and I loaded him up, and then so that horse has been really good. Yeah. And
Martin's got a great buckskin gelding, and back, I think it was at the Horsemen's Reunion a few years ago in Paso Robles, California, and somebody else was there. Team doctoring, and somebody else was riding this beautiful buckskin of Martin's, and he had the heels, and somebody else holding the heads, and that buckskin just started to buck right there, on the end of the rope. And I was standing beside Martin, and I said, whoa, what's going on? And Martin said, well, the thing is, you got to slide some rope and let him move his feet, and if he can't move his feet, he'll do that.
No, they kind of get bound up, and for me, it was my first colt, so I was pretty nervous and trying to make sure I did, and trying to keep things in, slip rope, don't let it zing, and especially sometimes they hear that nylon on nylon rub, and then they get spooked and jump around. And
in the hills, beyond the prairie, just below the timber line, on our trusty faithful ponies, we'll go riding back in time, and we are sailors of the saddle, leather-faced and hard as steel,
riding high, riding easy, with a cowboy in your heart. And I can see you're still a dreamer, sometimes stumble in the dark. And though your lies be uneventful, there's a cowboy in your heart. And I love the taste of freedom, the wind, the earth, and the sky. And I will wander and be a cowboy till I die. And I can see you're still a dreamer, sometimes stumble in the dark. And though your lies be uneventful, there's a cowboy in your heart. There's a cowboy in your heart.
The Canadian treasure Gary Felgard in one of his most beloved songs. Now back to Sam Simon.
You know, I've started 2 more colts since then, you know, and so that horse gave me a lot of confidence to kind of just to keep going. You know, if I'd have got bucked off, I'd have cowboyed up and got it done. But
yeah, but
when you're starting, it's kind of when you're learning something.
If you can, you know, be set up for success with that first exposure to it, that can make a big difference, can it? But where did your first exposure to horses come? Was that in Kuwait or was
in Kuwait? Well, see, I never had access to horses till I came to Canada, so it was all on TV. And you know, growing up in Kuwait, you have a lot of Western influence just with TV and the U.S. and things like that. Like Kuwait is a pro-American country, and just that was and as a kid, I've always been fascinated by him. You know, my parents would take me to a theme park and there'd be a pony ride, and I'd just beg and plead, "Can you please let me go on the pony ride?" And they're like, "Okay, sure, go." You know? And I don't think my parents ever figured that someday an East Indian kid grew up in Kuwait would actually go out to full-time cowboying.
Earning your spurs and making a living on the back of a horse on a ranch in Western Canada.
No, I mean, it's also kind of, you know, lots of times I guess people think that things are impossible. And I think this was at church or somewhere I heard this, that everything is difficult, but nothing is impossible. And for me now, today, I'm like, yeah, there's some truth to that.
Yeah.
If you want it bad enough, and you know, for me especially, I didn't get it because of anything I did. For me, there's a fate story and a God that answers prayer, and I think the whole cowboying thing came true because of an honest prayer that went up and said, "Look," I said, "God, why would you give me a passion for animals?" And I always liked livestock. And growing up in India, when I went to college in India, we used to show. My outlet for animals was we showed conformation shows, we showed Dobermans.
Yeah.
So that was my outlet, and I was like, why? And so there was always a desire to kind of work with animals and livestock, but I never knew how all this can come together. So I just prayed. I said, Lord, if you can, why? You created me. You gave me all these passions. Why would you make me an East Indian kid and put me in a place where none of this makes any sense? So I just left it at that. And then today, working cows and riding horses, and I got a couple dogs, and that whole, you know, to live the life and to be able to work with animals and accomplish a goal, to me, that's an answer to prayer. So I'm, guys tell me that's an interesting story, and I said, well, it's.
Are you bashful?
There's more to that.
How are you doing?
Yeah.
Well, there's more of Sam's fascinating story in a little while, and Baxter Black is next with the story of a cowboy on a green colt, and he actually head-roped a low-flying Canada goose. A song from Matt Robertson, and then the Rangeland News, when the Spirit of the West continues right after this.
Howdy, friends. This is Baxter Black on Spirit of the West with Hugh McLennan with a little peek at Goosebump. Well, friends, thanks for listening. It'll be no surprise that I've published a beautiful new hardback book called A Commotion in Rhyme. It fits in the bunkhouse, the outhouse, the bookstore, the library, or the cookbook. Unfortunately, it won't fit in a cupcake. Buy two, get one free. A commotion? Oh. Call 800-654-2550 or BaxterBlack.com. Come to think of it, it might fit in a Caesar salad. Emporia, Kansas is on the flyway of the majestic Canada goose. The cowboys working at the feedlot saw a lot of these big birds. They liked corn and silage as well as the steers did. Jim is a journeyman feedlot cowboy and was demonstrating his ability with his rope as they pushed some poles up the alley to the vet shack. The other cowboys respected him and knew that his team rope and buckle was real. While Jim was displaying the proper angle and how to control the tip, he lost control. The rope slipped from his hand and shot straight up in the air. Coincidentally, the lead gander of a low-flying squadron of geese heading in for a lunch break flew right into Jim's loop. Honest, there were witnesses. The goose was slapped to the ground like a wayward tetherball. He rose in a squawk, and a flurry of feathers sighted in on Jim and charged. Jim was riding Buck. Buck was only 3, and though he had adjusted to the roar of the feed mill, the klaxon of the bucket loader in reverse, and the smell of overflow lagoon, he had never been attacked by maddened waterfowl. Buck swapped ends as Jim grabbed the horns. They raced down the alley, which ended in a concrete feed bunk. While Jim was debating whether to punch the ejection seat, Buck took to the air and sailed over the bunk. To no one's surprise, the pursuing goose lifted off the runway and soared between the lip of the bunk and the horizontal neck cable. Unfortunately, he was dragging 35 feet of 3/8 soft lay right-hand twist nylon rope. The trailing tail of the rope whipped around the cable. The elasticity of the steel, the nylon, and the vertebrae allowed the feathered projectile to stretch far enough to spring the goose back across the feed bunk. Like Venus Williams returning a serve, he managed to bounce in a muddy spot and survive. While the audience of cowboys hooted, honked, and hollered over the feat of Jim's heading a goose, Jim regained his composure, eased the snorting buck over to the bunk, and announced that tomorrow he would demonstrate his technique, healing geese. This is Baxter Black on Spirit of the West with Hugh McLennan. Thanks for listening.
Farm Fair International, one of Canada's top agricultural shows, returns this November 7th to 11th. Guests from around the world will gather in the Edmonton region to show and sell top-quality livestock, make important connections, share knowledge, and build our industry. While you're there, enjoy shopping in Ram Country Marketplace or take in the Heritage Ranch Rodeo. It's a big deal to buy, sell, and connect. Make sure you're there. Plan your visit at farmfairinternational.com. As the world continues to enjoy beef, it seems there's still a need for good cowboys on solid horses looking after the cows and calves and yearlings that roam the rangeland of the West. And as the old hands retire, it does my heart so much good to see so many young folks stepping up and doing the job with cowboy pride. Folks like Matt Robertson, top hand, and a fine singer and songwriter too. Here he is.
Hot coffee is waiting, he's contemplating moving to a country where the mercury don't drop. Looks forward to summer, why he don't leave you wonder. He must love this life or he's too dumb to stop. His spurs they're jingling, his toes they're tingling. Frosty breath rises like warm chimney smoke. He's calving cows on stormy nights, he's been riding since daylight. Trots for the house, but he'd sure like to low. They call it a country where a cowboy is king, where peaceful right is easy on your mind. He wonders if he can hold out one more frigid, high, lonesome winter time. He cusses the snow, but he's still gotta go. To shirk any task would be a blow to his pride. But the winters seem colder, each year he grows older, making him as bitter as the wind outside. They call it a country where a cowboy is king, where a peaceful day's ride is easy on your mind. He wonders if he can hold out one more frigid, high, lonesome winter time. That once mended, the pain he thought ended, return each season with the coming of the storm. And old flames he had kindled, he once thought long dwindled, return late at night, but no longer are warm. They call it a country where a cowboy is king, and a peaceful day's ride is easy on your mind. He wonders if he can hold out one more frigid, high, lonesome, oh so lonesome, that frigid, high, lonesome winter time.
Now the news of the Rangeland, a roundup of news and coming events from around the West.
At the top of page 1, it says, with the new Canada-Mexico-U.S. trade agreement called USMCA replacing NAFTA, we have a report on how it's playing out in the U.S., and I wondered if U.S. Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue really knew much about Western Canada, but apparently he has heard of British Columbia. In this report from Gary Crawford, the first voice you hear will be the U.S. Agriculture Secretary.
We in USDA are certainly glad to have Humpty Dumpty put back together again.
Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue, his audience, the North American Meat Institute Symposium in Washington. Humpty Dumpty, of course, the former NAFTA, now called USMCA. Perdue said he talked Thursday with Canadian Ag Minister Macaulay about it.
And while he's getting beat up a little bit, we are aligned to make sure that this agreement works out for the betterment of both of our countries, all three of our countries.
Perdue later told reporters the original intent for agriculture in the NAFTA negotiations was to do no harm, but he said it's turned out better than that.
We get better access for dairy, we get better access for poultry, for eggs, we get the wheat grading issue resolved, we get the wine issue resolved in British Columbia. And those are all improvements in where we were.
Now, he says the U.S. will go after new agreements with the EU, Japan, India, and China. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.
Meanwhile, Canadian dairy farmers are expressing their displeasure, some reports say, but grain and meat producers were optimistic after the announcement of a new deal. Dairy Farmers of Canada launched a Twitter campaign against the new agreement, even though Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Foreign Affairs Minister Chrystia Freeland promised compensation. A handful of dollars does not replace the livelihood of dairy farmers, said one tweet. Securing duty-free access for Canadian beef was important, says the Canadian Cattlemen's Association, as was maintaining a dispute settlement provision. The CCA said new chapters on regulatory practices and competitiveness provide an institutionalized pathway to continue the objectives of continuous improvement. But for the supply-managed sectors, the deal is a blow. Alberta Milk called it a dark day. Alberta beef producers are in the process of voting on the thorny question of whether to have a refundable or a non-refundable checkoff. Ballots can be cast by mail, in person, at one of 46 Agricultural Financial Services Corp offices in the province, or at one of the zone meetings held in October and November. Voting is scheduled to occur between October 19th, and that's this weekend, and November 13th. And Alberta's Agricultural Products Marketing Council is expected to distribute information about their plebiscite, about 18,000 Alberta cattle producers will be eligible to vote. Well, October 23rd, there's a special Angus calf and yearling sale, plus the regular sale at the BC Livestock Co-op in Kamloops. October 24th at the Williams Lake Yards, and they have their Angus Hereford Influence Calf Sale on October the 25th, the regular Williams Lake Sale on October 26th, the regular cattle sale at the Vanderhoof Yards. You can get all the information and see the auctions live at bclivestock.bc.ca. Meanwhile, at the Innisfail Auction Market, pre-sort sales are underway. Weighing the calves starts at 8 a.m. Sunday, and they hope you can have your calves in before 5 p.m. On Saturday night for Sunday weighing. And you can call them to book your calves at 1-800-710-3166. And, of course, regular Wednesday sales, 9 a.m., butcher cows and bulls, feeders and yearlings to follow, and then bred cows and cow-calf pairs. And that takes us down to the final item, and we were on our way with our 17th annual Spirit of the West cruise, flew from Kamloops to Calgary to Toronto and finally Quebec City, and on the leg from Calgary to Kamloops, a couple of young fellas were the flight attendants, and in the captain's chair was a lady pilot. And Harold Turner, along with his wife Shirley, longtime ranchers in our area, were traveling with us, and Harold said, "Oh boy, things have really changed. Now, the guys are serving coffee and the women are flying the planes." And Shirley said, "Yeah, and did you notice the N on the tail?" And that's the Rangeland News. Coming up is the Urban Saddles and Western Wear Horse Training File, and more from Sam Simon when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. Coming up on the Urban Saddles and Western Wear Horse Training File, a look at the hazards of riding one horse and trying to lead a couple more. I've been tangled up in that situation a few times, and I'll discuss a few things that might make it a little safer. So what are you doing from August 29th to September 13th, 2019? Well, Billy and I will be hosting our 18th annual Spirit of the West cruise, and here's where we'll be going. We'll fly to Dublin, Ireland. We'll be visiting an Irish thoroughbred breeding farm. We'll be hosted by the Irish Cattle Breeding Federation, and then we'll sail to some historic and beautiful places including Cork, Belfast, then Glasgow and Inverness, Scotland. And we might even get pictures of Nessie, the Loch Ness Monster. And we'll have stops in Paris and London. Now, this is something we've always wanted to do, and we'd love to have you join us. Get all the information at 1-800-530-0131. And check our Spirit of the West cruise page at hugh-mclennan.com and our cruise Facebook page.
Now it's time for the Horse Training File, brought to you by Irvine Tack and Western Wear, Canada's largest Western store.
Urban Tack and Western Wear is Canada's largest Western retailer with over 60,000 square feet of everything Western. This Western wonderland has an endless variety of tack, boots, jeans, and outerwear with new items arriving daily. With over 1,000 saddles to choose from, you're bound to say Urban's is totally a unique place to shop. The kids will love the styles. You love the quality. Urban Tack and Western Wear off exit 305 on Highway 2 by Crossfield, open 7 days a week. Online at urbans.ca. Heard from a friend of mine who got into a wreck doing something that's pretty common. He was trying to lead a couple of horses while he was riding another one. And he was in the process of getting on his saddle horse with both halter shanks from the horses he was leading in his hand when the horse on the outside took a lunge at the horse next to his saddle horse, and that horse banged into him, knocking him off to the ground because he hadn't quite got into the saddle yet. And all three horses now were loose, and he was kind of bruised and battered, and he asked me what he could have done to make this process safer. I said, get out my little book, Ways of the West, and turn to page 7. It's an illustration of leading three horses from the ground, but the principle's the same. Know the dominant horse and keep it next to you, and keep the submissive horse on the outside of the dominant horse. Why? Because if the dominant horse objects to the submissive horse being in his space and he tries to move him away, he won't move him into you. Now, if you're leading a couple of horses from another horse, make sure the horse you're riding is solid, well broke, and used to having ropes going around his butt and under his tail. Make sure he'll stand while you get on, because if he starts to circle while you have two halter shanks in your hand connected to the other horses, it can get pretty tangled up and western. I'd even say don't try this until you're pretty handy with ropes, halter shanks, and saddle horns. It's usually easier to keep both the horses you're leading on your right side, both shanks in your right hand, and of course your reins in your left hand. Getting into the saddle can still be the toughest part, and sometimes it can be a lot easier if you get on first while someone else holds the other horses, and then they hand you the halter shanks one at a time, again keeping the submissive horse on the outside. Now, once you're on your way, if you really pay attention, it should go fine until you have to take all three ponies through a gate. And we'll save that procedure for another horse training file. We take a lot of pride in how our horses look and how they perform and how they feel, and something that really helps with that is a daily feeding of Hoffman's Horse Ration. You can find out more at hoffmanshorseration.com. Farm Fair International, one of Canada's top agricultural shows, returns this November 7th to 11th. Guests from around the world will gather in the Edmonton region to show and sell top-quality livestock, make important connections, share knowledge, and build our industry. While you're there, enjoy shopping in Ram Country Marketplace or take in the Heritage Ranch Rodeo. It's a big deal to buy, sell, and connect. Make sure you're there. Plan your visit at farmfairinternational.com. Well, you'll hear more about Sam Simon's dream of being a working cowboy and how a young fella born in India, growing up in Kuwait, wound up living his dream and earning the respect of his peers after another song that's a great fit about that from Kevin Davis.
Have you ever heard the sound of hoofbeats in the dirt? Have you ever listened to a cowboy sing at work? Have you ever heard the sounds of a gathering fall? Oh, that lonesome coyote call. Have you ever watched the sunrise while sitting in a saddle, or look down from a hilltop at a valley full of cattle? Have you ever seen the sight of an eagle as he flies in that big wide open sky? Some things in this old world just don't have a price. A lot of folks are walking around unhappy with their lives. And I know it's the simple things that God has made for me. So cowboys, but I'll be. I've rode the Rocky Mountains, Lord, they almost touch the sky. I've heard the bull elk bugle in the aspens up on high. I lay down on my bedroll beneath the stars above, and I thank God for the life I love. Some things in this old world just don't have a price. A lot of folks are walking around unhappy with their lives. But I know it's the simple things that God has made for me. So cowboys, but I'll be. I know it's the simple things that God has made for me.
has been at the Kamloops Cowboy Festival. He has been a real fan favorite, darn good cowboy, and a real nice guy besides. A wonderful voice, too. Well, let's get back to Sam Simon now.
Well, that's a wonderful story, Sam.
Yeah.
It really is. And I see the passion in your eyes when you're working with these guys and you're accepted as one of their peers now. I mean, that's got to mean so much.
Oh,
you kind of admired them from a distance for years, and now you're one of them.
Yeah, no, and that's like when I kind of got around all these guys through Pioneer Ranch camps out in Sundre, and I've heard of Bryn Thiessen and Gordy Cunningham, and these guys sounded larger than life. Yeah. And then, it just took the courage to go up to them and say, hey, I don't know much. I'd like to learn. Would you be willing to, if you let me tag along? Yeah. And I won't promise if I won't get in the way, and if I do, yell at me.
Well, so I've had lots of that. Yeah, if you're going to join a cowboy crew, I mean, getting yelled at is all a big part of it.
It's a learning experience, and you kind of, and I took that, it's an education, so you kind of have to, if somebody's yelling at you, and I mean, it does get old after a while. You're like, well, I've learned it. Let me try. Yeah. Give me a try. Yeah. And then if I mess up, sure, bring me a new one. But
I wonder, going back to Douglas Lake, I can't imagine Jake Cootley ever yelling at anybody. Yeah. I only rode there 3 days one time when Trevor Tebow asked me to come on. And when they moved replacement heifers from Chaperon to English Bridge, and I don't know how many, 1,500 of them or something like that, big bunch of them. And I was riding right alongside Jake Cootley, and I didn't realize we had to swing him to the left at this point to go up through this draw somewhere, and he just, instead of saying, we got to turn him this way, he rode right over to me and very softly, you bend him, and that's all he said. I just can't imagine him yelling, but some guys, no uncertain terms. Yeah.
No, and then it's kind of, especially when you're working cattle, you're always, nobody, and then I knew they were never yelling in anger.
Oh, no.
They were all trying to get you to hear, because I'm new and I'm still figuring out this whole deal, and they just wanted to be heard. So after the drive, when cattle are where we needed to get them, and I'll come back and say, I'm sorry if I was in there. They're like, no, we just needed you to hear. And you did, and it takes a while to kind of, and then guys, and you get to know how they work. And then,
Well, Sam's story is so interesting that we'll continue it again next week.
He rode north out of Texas to an uncharted land, looking for a place to make his way. With a saddle and a bedroll and a dream in his mind, he started a legend, still living today. With a hat made by Stetson, spurs and high heel boots, through the years not that much has changed. He never meant to be a hero, it just turned out that way. He's still around and cowboy is his name. He's what all the little fellas want to grow up to be, and what women think they can domesticate. He's at home on a range and alone in a crowd, feels he was born 100 years too late. What he does, he doesn't do for fortune or for fame. It's a way of life, 'cause cowboy is his name. He's been wrote about in poetry, sung about in song, talked about in Houston and Cheyenne. You might see him at the stockyards or the local rodeo, but most days he's out making a hand. He doesn't measure worth in money or a fancy house in town. He's happy with his life out on the plains. He's a friend you can depend on in the snow and sleet and rain. He takes pride in knowing cowboy is his name. He's what all the little fellas want to grow up to be, what the women think they can domesticate. He's at home on a range and alone in the crowd, feels he's born 100 years too late. What he does, he doesn't do for fortune or for fame. It's a way of life, 'cause cowboy is his name.
there somewhere riding on the range. He's proud to know the cowboy is his name.
And that's the legendary songwriter Blue Creed. Coming up, the Cowboy Poetry Spotlight and our classic Song of the West, When the Spirit of the West, continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. In this week's classic Song of the West segment, we'll look back at a song that appeared in a collection called Songs of the Cattle Trails and Cow Camps, compiled by Western music historian John A. Lomax in January of 1919. In the introduction, Lomax says, in making the collection, the cowboys often sang or sent me songs which I recognized as having already been in print, although the singer usually said that some other cowboy had sung the song to him and he did not know where it originated. And many of these claim to be called songs, but they've actually been an introduction to music by cowboys who in their isolation and loneliness have found solace in a narrative or descriptive verse devoted to cattle scenes. And he goes on to say, we might see the cowboy at work, at play, hear the jingle of his big bell spurs, the swish of his rope, the creaking of his saddle gear, and the thud of thousands of hooves on the long, long trail, and know something of the life that attracted from the East some of its best young blood to a work that was necessary in the winning of the West. And on page 86 of this wonderful collection are the songs inspired by the work by Lomax, one called Song of the Cattle Trail. And Oklahoma ranch manager Gary Pratt has recorded a collection of songs from 1919 to 1928, and this is his version of that song.
The dust hangs thick upon the trail, and the horns and the hooves are clashing, while off at the side through the chaparral, the men and the strays go crashing. But in right good cheer the cowboy sings, for the work of the fall is ending. And then it's ride for the old home ranch, where a maid's love's light is tending. Then it's crack, crack, crack on a beef steer's back, and it's run, you slow-footin' devil, for I'm soon to turn back, where through the black love lamps gleams along the level. He's trailed them far o'er the trackless range, as this night of the saddle leather he has risked his life in the mad stampede, and has breasted all kinds of weather. But now it's the end of the trail inside, and the hours on wings are sliding, for it's back to the home and the only girl, when the foreman okays the option. Then it's quirt, 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 it's run or get hurt, you hang back, bawling critter, for a man who's in love with a turtle dove ain't got no time to frit her.
Wow, that's a long-lost classic for sure. Well, as fall fades into winter, memories of some cold rides come drifting back, and the late Jack DeWerf from Kansas wrote this one called Old Buck and Blue.
Lord, this time you sent a good one, and I'm wondering what to do, but Old Buck and I decided we better go and take Old Blue. Old Buck looked up and nickered, and Blue, he licked my hand, and the three of us rode from the barn, and the snow, it cut like sand. The wind lashed out like fire, while whiteness filled the space, and the swirling snow stuck to my chaps, and the ice blew against my face. The blizzard in her fury seemed relentless to let go, and I pondered for a moment about her dealing us death's blow. But we had cattle in the open with babies at their side, and no matter how I feared her, I knew that I would ride. 'Cause though this cowboy hide is tough, this heart is soft as down, and my feelings are some different than those folks who live in town. I guess they'd think me senseless to buck a storm as such, but you realize, my maker, that it's not asking all that much. For these cattle, they're like family, and Mother Nature's one we fight, and to leave 'em out there drifting, well, it just wouldn't be right. So we'll push 'em into shelter and pray, Lord, that they're okay till I can get the team hitched and fill their bellies with hay. Oh, it's a frozen, frigid hell out here we're traveling through, but old Buck, he sure knows where home is, and riding drag is faithful blue.
Well, thank you again for making the ride, and I sure hope you can be back next week right here at the same time, when you'll hear more of Sam Simon's amazing story. And thanks as always to the Spirit of the West support crew, Mark and Kathy McMillan. And you know, if you need tractor parts, any make, any year, see Mark's page, bctractorparts.com. And special thanks to our crew specialists, Jim and Karen Bell. They went way above the call of duty, making our 17th annual cruise an unforgettable experience for all of us. Till next week, I'm Hugh McLennan. Hope to see you down the trail somewhere real soon.